Addressing the committee must state their first and last name and agency for the record. Please turn on your microphone before speaking. That goes for all of us in here too. And to facilitate electronic access, no person shall speak until recognized by the chair. So we've officially called this meeting to order, and can we do a roll call, please?
City of Clovis. Can we verify that we have audio on Zoom? And someone,
I can hear you.
We hear you.
Okay. You see a thumbs up, so that's a good sign. Okay.
okay, so do we have anybody from the City of Clovis? City of Coalinga? City of Firebaugh? City of Fowler? City of Fresno? City of Huron?
Here in Zoom.
City of Kerman? On Zoom? City of Kingsburg? City of Mendota? City of Orange Cove? City of Parlier?
Here on Zoom.
City of Reedley?
Here.
City of San Joaquin? City of Sanger?
This is Derek Sylvester at City of Sanger.
City of Selma?
Present.
County of Fresno?
Here.
San Joaquin Air Pollution Control District?
Here.
Fresno LAFCO?
Here.
Caltrans District 6?
Here.
Fax? Here. Clovis Transit?
Here.
Fresno County Rural Transit Agency?
Here.
PG&E?
Here.
T-Mobile? Tranquility Resource Conservation District? U.S. Green Building Council, Central California? Sequoia Riverlands Trust?
Here on Zoom.
Inspiration Transportation? Fresno Cycling Club?
Present.
Dr. Anthony Molina, Public Health Advocate? Self-Help Enterprises? Fresno County EDC? Fresno Chamber of Commerce? Westlands Water District?
Here.
State Center Community College District? Measure C Citizens Oversight Committee? League of Women's Voters of Fresno? Michelle Roman, Public at Large?
Here.
Par Marquez, Public at Large?
Here.
Michelle Lopez, Public at Large?
Here.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, next, item number 2, new information discussion items. A, approve minutes of the meeting for July 24th, 2024. It's an action item. Did anybody have any questions on this item? If not, we'll move for a motion. Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Thank you.
President Cycling Club would move to second.
Great, thank you. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody abstain or that wasn't here or? Okay. I think we're good. All right, thank you. Motion passes. Okay. Moving on to 2B, project evaluation criteria approval. Ophelia will be taking this one.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So today I'm going to be presenting on the programming technical working project evaluation criteria. This is an action item, and today's staff will recommend that the RTP Roundtable recommend approval of the final draft of the 2026 RTP project evaluation criteria to the TTC Impact and the FCOG Policy Board. And then next slide. I think I have a clicker. Okay, so we've actually met 3 times. You can see the dates there, July 23rd, August 1st, and August 13th, in order to finalize the final project evaluation criteria. The members who assisted, or the representatives who assisted these meetings, consisted of several agency representatives, as well as a transit representative, Caltrans, as well as other representatives from entities, non-governmental organizations interested in this item. Next slide, please. Okay, so we made a few revisions. The first one being we changed some of the project topic score weight. So the percentiles, and I'll give an example on the next slide, but for now, we made that revision. We also updated the bike and pedestrian connectivity question based on feedback that we received from the Programming Technical Working Group members. And as well as we removed the climate adaptation question number 9 from the road capacity increasing category that was there in previous the previous RTP. In addition, we rephrased some questions and in several categories. And finally, we just made some revisions, mostly grammatical in nature, word choice, etc. Sentence structure. We could go ahead and go on to the next slide. Okay, so I apologize for the small print. I try to make this as big as possible, but and you should have access to this Excel spreadsheet that has all the scoring criteria for this RTP cycle. But you can see there, this in particular is the bicycle and pedestrian projects scoring criteria. You can see the question number, the score weight, so the percentile that's in there, as well as the question specifically that ask that the agencies would have to answer. So once they answer those questions, it would provide them with a score. As you can see, the 100, 50, 25, etc. And at the where you see the yellow, the note section, that will notify them who will be scoring that question. So for example, the first question that would be scored by the project sponsor, which would be the agency. There's also questions that we would score as FCOG staff. And then finally, the total weight of the criteria group, in this case, would be the mobility and access, which would be a total weight score of 25%. And we could answer any questions as well, if anybody has any questions regarding this format.
Just jump in real quick. For those questions that are going to be scored by COG staff, this will essentially be geolocation. So based on where the project is located, it will receive a score. If it's within our environmental justice area, it'll receive a score, and certain other criteria that are mapping based. That is really the scoring that COG staff will do, and it'll be based on the location of the project.
Thank you for that clarification. Oh, we have a question, Paul?
Yes, I do. You mentioned at the beginning that there was a change in the bike pedestrian connectivity criteria. What was the change from last time?
So on my specific notes, I don't have it with me. I'm not sure if Shishan, if you might have it. Sorry, there were so many questions. So he should be able to answer. Thank you, Shishan.
Yeah, I can answer. The bike and pets connected part is basically based on the suggestion. We replace how we describe the bike facility and the pedestrian facility to make it more clear, to make them follow the state definition of the 4 types of bike facilities. Yes, so that's basically the modification we made based on suggestion.
Let me just add, I made several recommendations to this category since I'm the active transportation person. And the initial draft that COG put forward on question 1, they recommended 4% or 4 points. And I recommended they increase that to 10 points, which they did. And then, of course, they clarified several of the pedestrian in, they did not exactly use the language I recommended, but they basically substantively accepted my ideas. So they adopted most of my recommendations on the bicycle and pedestrian category. So I was very pleased that they took basically most or nearly all of my recommendations on the bicycle and pedestrian. But the big one was a change in question 1 from 4 to 10, which is connectivity. Idea being is that we're striving to develop networks. We get developing bikeway networks. That was the thrust of my comment.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. He sat on the technical working group and provided extensive comments on the bicycle and pedestrian category. So we did work with Nick quite closely to refine that criteria. Did you have any further questions?
Just appreciate that clarification because I wasn't sure what the, what the change was and see how it could be beneficial.
Yeah, thank you. We have a question on Zoom.
Hi, Tony Molina. As the public health representative here, I had a question about the climate adaptation question that was removed from the road capacity increasing category. Could you please explain the before and after on that or clarify that, please? Thank you.
Yep. So beforehand, we had a question that basically stated, would this project be a beneficial climate? Essentially, would it reduce greenhouse gases and vehicle miles traveled? We believe that capacity increasing projects kind of by definition don't meet that threshold of reducing GHG and VMT, and we didn't think it was appropriate to maintain that question moving forward in our criteria.
Any other comments? Questions? Oh, one more online. Adam?
Well, just following up on that last response, I mean, it seems, I guess I'm not sure I totally understand the logic of taking that question out. I mean, I would agree that road capacity projects, kind of by definition don't have those benefits, but it seems like that is something worth taking into account and being aware of when these decisions are being made. So asking that question, it seems like does have some value in that you're kind of making clear which categories of projects do in this case contribute to the kind of the broader climate goals. So I guess I'm just I'm not I understand I understand and agree with the idea that category of project for that category of projects, the answer to the question would not be yes, but I'm not clear on how it follows from that question should be taken out.
Yeah, so for the scoring criteria, how we're evaluating projects this cycle compared to previous cycles is that within each category, the projects will be scored against each other, against projects of the same type. So before, how projects were evaluated was they were evaluated across mode types. And so that would capture that effect, right? The projects that did not reduce greenhouse gases or VMT would essentially receive lower scores compared to those projects that did. What's changing this cycle is that we're now just going to evaluate the projects within a category, and the scenarios themselves will then set out essentially the strategy on VMT and GHG reduction. So what you'll see when we start talking about scenarios in upcoming meetings is essentially we'll be doing that analysis by scenario, and that will really dictate kind of which scenarios get these types of projects and which don't, and how we evaluate greenhouse gases and VMT. So it's kind of a change in how we're doing scenario development this cycle, where previous cycles we did evaluate projects across all mode types, where this cycle it'll be a change in that evaluation.
Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
Sure.
Just a follow-up question.
Oh, we have a question in the room. Do you mind hitting your microphone? They can't hear you online. Sorry.
Okay.
We'll follow back up with you on Zoom in just a minute. Sorry.
Okay.
On the climate adaptation question, tagging on to all the comments made, I could see that in road capacity increasing, that it could seem that by definition, it's not climate adaptation, but I'm wondering if you take account new materials, either on the surfacing, on the reflecting side, or just new types of concrete that have less carbon content. It seems like those kind of criteria would lend itself to go into that climate adaptation on the road increasing scoring category.
Sure. Yeah. So the way our scenarios are developed with the modeling, it doesn't take into effect what type of materials. It's simply looking at the passenger or the, use of the roadway, and not necessarily how the roadway was built or what kind of materials the roadway uses. So essentially for our scoring is, how do people utilize the infrastructure? Would it reduce GHG or would it increase GHG? And that's really the evaluation that's done from the modeling perspective and how our scenarios are developed. So yeah, we don't evaluate necessarily the material use of a piece of infrastructure. That's an interesting comment, and that's something we can take into consideration. But for the purposes of our modeling exercises and how we develop scenarios, it wouldn't evaluate the actual infrastructure composition.
Is this something though that can be included, or at what point are you going to look at LCIs for project development? I know in the built environment, it's already getting demanded by Title 24. I'm not sure how the regulations are there on the transportation side.
Yeah, I'm not aware of them. I think by jurisdiction, it kind of depends on how each jurisdiction is treating their projects. For our purposes, for planning, long-range planning purposes, we aren't evaluating exactly the build material or the processes they use to construct a roadway.
Well, the model doesn't have the capacity to do that
Yeah.
at this point. I mean, and there's no uniform, like Paul is saying, there's no uniform manner in which the decision as to what material is used is, is based upon across jurisdictions, right? It's kind of a jurisdiction by jurisdiction decision. And so I would think that as that becomes more prevalent, it becomes, either codified as a mandate or simply as a matter of practice, that there could be consideration for that in the modeling. But because all of this is handled through mathematical modeling, there's no real way for us to capture that at this time. And I don't know if some of our jurisdictions want to comment on that as well, if there's, and the extent to which those materials are already being used or not, or, the variety of materials that are out there right now.
But thank you for your question. On Zoom, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Just a follow-up question. On the resiliency question, there's two components, each 5 points: the compact infill development and the 5 points for emission mitigation. So how does that compare with the previous climate adaptation point weighting? Is that the same pretty much? Is that a surrogate for that, or was there a change?
They're similar, somewhat increased. I don't know if Shi-Chin, if you have it in front of you, or if we need to follow up with the specific breakdown of how that weighting changed, but I believe it's either the same or slightly modified increase. But Shi-Chin, do we have that?
I can check it after this meeting, but I think the infill part is more about the land use development. Is different with the climate resilience, more care about the project itself design.
Yeah,
we can follow back up with you on the specifics.
Yeah, just curious, apples to apples. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no more questions currently, I just want to, oh, one more question. Go ahead, Laura.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add to my comment earlier that I would recommend to add some form of counting of innovation or addition of innovation points for using new materials. I know the industry is working really hard on figuring out new surfaces that are more reflective, reducing heat island effect, which is really an important component to consider within our communities. There's a lot of new companies coming out with different form of concretes that have lower embodied carbon contents. I know the discussion on embodied carbon is just really coming into the public discourse. While I understand that it's not yet in your systems, it's really something to get ready for. So to help local governments make the decision to try out using those new materials, I think it would be very beneficial to have at least an innovation point included in there so that it would reward governments that are the early adopters and are willing to try that out.
Willing to commit to that early. Yeah, is that what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah. So that there's a little bit of a carrot that encourages innovation here on the ground.
Yeah, I just want to add in the road maintenance category, we do consider if they use a new materials, but for the capacity increasing, because a long-term project, we might have no information about the material and the detailed things yet. So that's why we didn't consider that in the capacity increasing. But for road maintenance, the more near future, if we have the information, we will consider it into the scoring.
Okay, thank you, Laura. So I'm just going to move on to the next slide. And if we can, I think if it's okay with Paul, if anybody would like to see what's the prior scores and what we changed, to be more specific, we'll be happy to email that out to you as well. And then again, the timeline. So today we are requesting an action. This will then go to TTC and PAC and then the board for final approval. And then finally, we would start the 2026 call for projects in October, and that would end November 6th. And then we are anticipating final decision on project selection on December 1st of 2024, if this is all approved. So guess that leads back to the action item. So staff recommends that the RTP Roundtable recommend the approval of the final draft of the 2026 RTP project evaluation criteria to the TTC and PAC and the FCOG policy board.
Okay,
Thank you.
great, thank you. Is there any public comment on this item? Okay. So I'm open for a motion to approve. Yes?
I would like to make a motion to approve the criteria with the addition of an additional innovation point.
Okay, so the motion is to approve with that extra caveat. So that would be the motion. If someone would like to second it with that addition to that.
I would second that. This is Matthew.
So I have a motion and a second with that addition. All in favor, say aye. Is there any opposed?
Aye.
So yes, so there's, opposition to that motion?
Sorry, before I vote, I couldn't hear the caveat over the Zoom. Could you
Yeah.
repeat the caveat?
Laura, do you want to say your motion one more time?
Sure, a motion to approve with the inclusion of an innovation point for the usage of innovative new materials that reduce embodied carbon or reduce
innovative
heat
materials.
island effect.
Question.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'll vote aye.
Could it involve also recycled materials?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
Yes,
Could we say new or recycle?
with the addition, of an innovation point for new materials, including recycled materials, materials that have a lower carbon content, materials that have a higher reflectance index. within this realm.
Can I ask how would you evaluate that? Are we gonna, when we submit our projects, do we say we're gonna use recycled material, or how would that be included?
Yeah, so essentially what would happen is that there would be a text box to include a description of the materials that will be used, and then that'll be evaluated by staff to make sure it does kind of meet the carbon sequestration or carbon reduction of the material used. So it would be a text box that would be filled in by the project sponsor that would need to be evaluated by COG staff.
And then that would also have to follow through to the FTIP, through the FTIP cycle as well.
I have a question. So is staff comfortable with having metrics where you could evaluate that?
So as Shichin mentioned before, that within the road maintenance category, we already are going to have this type of evaluation. So I believe actually we'll be able to accomplish this within the existing criteria, because we do in the road maintenance category have a place for people to describe their project, and they can include the materials that they're using. And then that could be, granted the points for that category. I think that's going to be the tricky part about your motion, is that, I mean, there's an interpretation here of what is kind of a realistic use of certain materials that kind of makes this a tricky ask, because it's kind of getting subjective on what can be evaluated and what can't be. So we're hoping that our current road maintenance category can help with that. That's my only reservation with your ask here, is that we haven't evaluated as a staff how we would implement it and what would qualify as like a low carbon material. And so that's the only kind of tricky part of your ask.
What I can do is, we can stick with the motions. Because we have a motion and a second. What I can do is a roll call vote. And since we already have a motion, and then we can see if it dies, see if it goes through, or if it dies, then we can bring it back for a different type of a motion.
I got a question. To which category does this new requirement pertain? You mentioned maintenance, but I don't think you in your motion specified which category.
No, that would be for all categories, not just.
For all categories.
Now that caused to be some heartburn. I don't know how, I'm not quite certain it pertains to transit. I'm not quite certain how it pertains to operations. I mean, I hear local staff who's going to have to live with this remaining vociferously quiet. They're the ones who are going to have to live with it. They're being vociferously quiet. I don't see how it pertains to transit. I don't see it participates to, signal lights or sidewalks. I'm not quite certain how it pertains to road diets or bike lanes or cycle tracks. I'm not quite certain how it pertains to, bikeways. It may pertain to, I see how it pertains to maintenance. I see how it pertains to capacity enhancing projects. She's talking about everybody across the board. I think you got a no vote for me.
Okay, so
Just to clarify, it pertains to all these categories, because all these categories need materials to be built. We're not building roads out of thin air, we're building them out of materials. All these materials have a carbon footprint. And I think one of the big challenges that everybody has to go through is that we're going to have to learn how to use different materials to get us out of the mess that we're in, that we just have a lot of climate pollution that is produced with all of our actions. I'm not saying that every project has to be built out of these materials. I'm just saying that if somebody wants to go ahead and give those materials a try, they should get an extra bonus point to reward them and set that incentive, even if it's just one small point, that local jurisdictions actually make that decision. It's going to take a lot to get to a comfort level to use different type of concrete that are currently getting developed. but we need to give local, agencies the incentive to look into those materials. And I think out of that reason, it would make a lot of sense to have them in the RTP. And it's all connected because as we're using materials, every piece or every product has a carbon footprint. And by including that, we are really setting us up for the future and helps for innovation in our.
So for point of order, we've had a discussion, then we've had a motion and a second, and it was time for a vote, and we've done a vote. So we can either do a couple of different things here. We can either remove the motion and continue discussion, or we could do a roll call vote and see where it goes from there. Or we can see where it goes, or we can remove the motion and then continue discussion. So how would you guys like to proceed? Do you want to continue? It sounds like we want to continue the discussion. So do you want to remove your motion so we can continue the discussion of where your first motion was?
It may be useful to take a vote on this to see where the room stands on this particular motion.
It sounds like because we have people online wanting to talk. We have people in the room still wanting to talk. So I'm thinking the best thing we might want to do is remove your motion so we can have more of a discussion about it.
Yeah, I can remove the motion.
Okay.
Christine has her hand up
Yep,
online.
on Zoom. Christine, you have a comment?
So that way we can continue. I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's not valuable. I just want to make sure we can continue the discussion. That's all. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So online, I see Christine.
Yes, thank you. Hello. Hi. So I just want to provide a little background on the climate adaptation criteria. So back in 2020, Fresno COG completed a transportation network vulnerability study, which is a climate adaptation study. In that study, the Fresno COG identified a series of climate adaptation strategies to handle future extreme climate events. And I think we can actually go back to that study and refer to those climate adaptation strategy to see whether, other projects in the RTP that are proposed that can fit that climate adaptation strategies. So climate adaptation really is to adapt or to prepare our transportation infrastructure for future extreme climate events. And I think there's a point for the pavement materials. I think the industry is looking at more heat-resistant pavement materials for extreme heat condition in the future. And another example I can give is flooding. If a road or a bridge has the risk of being flooded in the future, and if a project is being proposed to address that situation, that fits the climate adaptation strategy in that study. So I think, if that's what the criteria is about, then that study should provide a lot of background information for this purpose.
We have, and then over here, go ahead.
I've heard, I'm not opposed to the concept. I think it's a great concept. I think the issue really is the evaluation criteria is subjective, and that makes it hard for cities to identify projects that would be evaluated and receive that extra point. I've heard recycled material, I've heard pavement, and those materials have different cost factors that go into the project as well. You have federal standards for some projects that may play into that may prohibit the use of some materials. So as much as I, am not opposed to the idea, and I think it's a great idea, I think the concept needs some further refinement in terms of how it's evaluated, to have some specific criteria that's more objective than subjective.
If I may, another element that I think is related is the weight that you're talking about. You mentioned a single point. I don't know if that's exactly what, if that's precisely what you mean, because a single point may not have the effect that you intend. But that would be another consideration is what kind of weighting are we really talking about when we're talking about assigning scoring criteria to this. But it gets back to to that point about, what are all the criteria that we're discussing here? Are the materials, do all the jurisdictions have access to all the materials? I think there may be some equity concerns in terms of resource availability, those types of considerations. So.
Any other discussion?
Can we go over that pavement criteria? Because my understanding is with the industry, the way it is and the cost that everybody's going to go, it's like 20-30% cost savings, and lots more projects are just going to become partially recycled projects for pavement. I mean, so that I would just want to look at their criteria again. That might be actually an easy criteria to include because it's kind of happening. Anyway, that's just my understanding, but I wanted to, if we could look at the pavement stuff again, make sure everybody understands what that part is on the road maintenance.
Yeah, so the payment piece, I think, yeah, Shi-Chen has in front of him the question on payment.
Yes, so for pavement, we actually didn't ask the detail about what kind of materials. It's a very general question whether it's considered a climate adaptation design. For the road maintenance, the main consideration will be some kind of a new material applied, but it's just one of the example. We don't want to limit to some specific type. We can cover all of the new designs. So, which is it's just a simple question to ask whether this project is considered climate adaptation.
So essentially it is already built into the criteria before the roundtable, but it's only limited to the maintenance criteria. It is not impacting the other mode types.
Online, I see Tony Molina, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I want to thank Christine for reminding us about the climate adaptation issues, which also has to do with the construction materials. So there's kind of a couple of issues there. So I was wondering if the capacity increasing criteria account for that aspect of climate adaptation that Christine raised. Can someone address that?
Shi-Chen, within the resiliency section of the capacity increasing, what questions do we have for that?
For the resilience, was concerned about the environmental effect. Where is the project located? Whether the area is a development area or whether it's areas have important farmland or the critical environmental resource. So for capacity increasing project, actually, the pavement effect on that on the GG emission will be just a small part. Consider the new capacity added and the new demand induced. So that's why we didn't. We wanted to remove those this question from the capacity increasing category.
I have it up on my phone. I downloaded it or whatever. So for road capacity increasing, there's two questions for resiliency, which is 10%. One of them says compact infill development. Would the project support compact development, mixed use, new narrow streets, pedestrian transit orientation? The other question is emission mitigation. Would the project add high occupancy vehicle lanes, high occupancy toll lanes, or peak only? This is for the road capacity increasing one. If you want any others,
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, so that doesn't really address the issues that Christine was referring to in terms of flood and heat, resilience there. So I was just wondering if that's a good idea or not. If that's may want to have some discussion about, in terms of, pavement index and that sort of thing over time. Those could, it seemed to me, be something that should be considered. I don't know if anybody else feels like that, but
the other ones do, like, when I look at road operation, there is a climate adaptation question for transit. There's a climate adaptation So some of the other ones do have climate adaptation questions.
I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. I don't know if anybody else is confused because I am a little bit right now about, the item as it stands before you right now is about approving the evaluation criteria. And it sounds like the roundtable has some concerns about innovation or climate adaptation. And so I think it'd be beneficial to hear from either Sheechan or Velia or both of you about how both of those aspects are met through the item that we've presented to the roundtable today, climate adaptation and innovation. How have we already integrated that? I think that would kind of bring us full circle so we could make a decision today. I don't know if either of you can speak to those two, seem like the main principles of what everyone's concerned about, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
So I would have to, because I unfortunately do not have the whole scoring criteria in front of me. And I know a lot of it is, we had a lot of questions on the scoring criteria. If you guys, I don't know if I could, usually we have a laptop and unfortunately this time we did not. So I apologize for that. But from what I know is that we did our best to cover everything that we normally do cover. But again, I don't want to speak on behalf if I don't have the information in front of me. So I would like the opportunity to get back to everyone. I don't know if I don't want to have to table this.
For the innovation project, we did have other project to just cover all kinds of new tech or any kind of new technology we can evaluate in the the 5 category we currently have. So for those projects, we'll ask to provide for a detailed description, and those projects will be evaluated separately, such as EV facilities and others. There are like so many new technique now, so we are not able to carry all of them into just the 5 criteria we currently, the category we currently have.
I'm sorry to cause so much confusion through my questions, and I didn't find a way to bring this in earlier. So I've gone over the categories, and they are certainly references to climate, but it's not referencing to materials. So I think, if we look at the different categories, oops, I'm sorry, my phone. It would be bike and ped, road maintenance, road capacity increasing, and road operation, I believe. And on the climate adaptation question, right now, it says, does the project reflect designs to mitigate or adapt to climate? Which a design is different than a material. I think it could be just added a question, does the project use materials that mitigate or adapt to climate change, and add some value to this in those different sections. And that way you can add this carrot to give a reward for taking the leap to use new materials. And I mean, it could also be something that everything else gets passed, and this addition of a new materials requirement will be added, or will be developed by staff and will be presented next time. I don't know if that's possible with the point distribution or not.
No.
But
Okay, I will, I'm going to do, I will take the next question. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to table this and we'll go to the next item. And so that way we'll give Ophelia some time to go get that information for us. And then we can just keep moving on to the next part of the agenda. And then we'll just come back to it. We're not going to table to the next meeting, just come back to it on the agenda at a later time. But I definitely, Jill, go ahead and
Yeah, Jill
take it
Gormley,
from-
City of Fresno. I think from an agency standpoint, it's hard to commit to these alternative materials, and we haven't tested them. We don't know how they'll handle or hold up in our heat. A lot of the funding sources don't allow us to pilot or test materials. I know from the City of Fresno, we don't have standards for all of these new materials. I think it's a idea and a good concept that maybe we should consider for the next RTP update, or, when maybe there's some more criteria to base this on, but from an agency standpoint, it really is hard. We want to do it, but we just don't know what that looks like. And for us to put that in our project description and be committed to it in the FTIP, it may pose challenges.
Yeah, because that is an important consideration, is that it's not just the RTP. It has to carry forward, such a commitment would have to carry forward into the actual project delivery phase, the programming of the funding into the FTIP.
Can I have one more comment? Erin Higginson, County Fresno. So for example, like the pavement, we might want to use recycled pavement in a project, but we won't know at this stage till you test the existing pavement, whether it's suitable or what kind of mix is suitable for recycling it and what level of recycling will work. And it works different in different areas depending on how it's paved. So is there a way to like put encouraging considering these things? Like, for example, safety in the HSIP guidelines, it says every time you want to put in a new signal, you have to evaluate whether you should put in a roundabout instead. So is there some way to just say, hey, before you build these projects, you'll consider these uses of recycled materials, new materials, innovation? Is there a way to we might not know at this point, like Jill said, if we can do it, but how do we remind everybody to consider doing it? That's just a thought of not boxing ourselves in, but making it like everybody wants to do this. And we have like a soft goal, but maybe not on an individual. It's hard to identify on an individual project basis if you're what materials you're going to use. But you could identify projects ahead of time as far as if they are going to be climate adaptation oriented, right? If they're going to raise roads for floods, or they're going to have protective effects on the environment. You can identify those ahead, but the materials are hard to identify at this level of planning document. So just, Okay, I'm going to table, Ryan, I see your hand raised. I'm going to come to you first. I have your name down for first for the next. We're going to come right back to item B. But in the meantime, I'm going to move to item C. So that way Ophelia can get the information she needs, and we're going to come right back to this item. But I want to make sure we keep moving for all of your time. I want to be able to keep moving down the agenda, and then we'll come back to item B again. So I'm going to move on to item C. I know, Simran, you're ready over there, to review vision statement, goals, and policies. So Simran, go for it.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Simran
How's
Judy,
your
Senior
day?
Regional Planner here at Fresno Council of Governments. This is an exciting information item. And so we'll start with just an overview of the policy element. There's no action to be taken today, just an introduction. So in the past, Fresno
I also
Council,
just had a pretty good conversation with
someone
on Zoom. Can you please
the
mute?
guy from River Park, Eric, our enemy. He tried to get us fired, and now he's trying to fire the people he.
That sounded interesting. I kind of want you to unmute, but we'll keep going.
He was getting
Yeah. Okay. So the policy element. In the past, Fresno COG has identified these 5 policy areas: equity, so focusing on distributing access to transportation to all of the communities and residents in our region; sustainability and resiliency, reducing the environmental impact of the transportation network; infrastructure and safety, developing safe multimodal corridors; and economy, so making transportation investments that will stimulate the local economy in the region, as well as innovation, finding new solutions for connectivity. Next slide, please. So what is the policy element? And I apologize that the font is so small. So I'll summarize, but I know that this will be distributed to you all. So the overarching goals and policies and strategies that will ultimately guide the transportation planning and decision-making within the Fresno region. So there's key components that we have used in the past for the RTP development: goals and objectives to get to desired outcomes, policies to guide decision-making, strategies to implement the policies and find new methods and approaches for those projects and programs that we specifically identify, and performance measures, the criteria in which we evaluate and track project selection, and then coordination and collaboration. That's where you all have a large role to play, and how we can have a cohesive approach to our transportation network. So these are the main components that we focus on when we're developing the policy element. We identify goals, and, you know, I think, okay, next slide, please. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. And so those all technically feed into the vision statement. So I'll just read this to you all. The vision statement from our last RTP is a region of diverse, safe, resilient, and accessible transportation options that improve the quality of life for all residents by fostering sustainability, equity, a vibrant economy, clean air, and healthy communities. And so this just sounds like a lot of words, but you'll see that in our goals and policies, these are actually attributed to programs, projects that we administer here at the regional level, but you all administer at the local level. And next slide, please. Might have to click it a couple times. Thank you. Okay, so last cycle, we had identified 5 goals that coincide with the policy areas that we started with. The first goal is improved mobility and accessibility for all. So that's anchored to the equity component. Vibrant communities that are accessible by sustainable transportation options. So sustainability and resiliency. A safe, well-maintained, efficient, and climate-resilient multimodal transportation network that's anchored to infrastructure and safety. 4, a transportation network that supports a sustainable and vibrant economy. So economy. And the last is innovation, a region, or it's anchored to innovation, but a region embracing clean transportation technology and innovation. So I think this will actually preface our item that we left behind quite well. Next slide, please. And so I won't read each policy to you, but the overarching goals that we've identified, the 5 goals, have policies that coincide. So the policies that are anchored to equity include encouraging participation from all communities that are affected by transportation projects, equitable distribution of both the benefits and burdens of projects, and then providing accessibility to serve the needs of all Fresno County residents. Next slide, please. So this goal is, again, focusing on sustainability and resiliency. There are several policies that align with this. I'll be brief, but reducing VMT by encouraging alternatives to single occupancy vehicle usage, investments in active transportation to encourage a mode shift, sustainable development focusing on growth near activity centers, preservation of agricultural land, and promoting diverse housing options for all income groups, working with the local governments to administer that goal and policy, and then regional consistency in planning efforts, as well as incentivizing efforts to improve air quality and minimizing pollutants. Next slide, please. And so for infrastructure and safety, we have policies that will prioritize investments to improve safety and embrace Vision Zero, promote transportation management systems that reduce congestion, creating a seamless network, maximizing cost benefits with transportation investment, and then increasing investments to offset the negative impacts of inclement weather, and maintaining a state of good repair. Next slide. Thank you. So for economy, we want to create a transportation network that supports the local economy by leveraging planning and transportation funding. and to invite private investment, as well as creating an efficient system for goods movement. Next slide, please. And so lastly, for innovation, we want to embrace mobility options that are environmentally friendly, leading to a reduction of pollutants and improving our air quality. And then also other solutions such as expanding broadband access. And so this is just a timeline of the development of the policy element. We anticipate adopting it about next year. I think it should be September of 2025. I can't see with the Zoom. Oh, sorry, June. So within a year. And so that's for you all to get kind of a overview of developing the policy element. Next slide. So for this cycle, because of the robust outreach and work with the policy subcommittee in the last cycle, and there's not a lot of changes, and these policies are still within the state and federal consistency, we don't think that it would be necessary to reconvene with a policy subcommittee. So we're recommending that the policy element be developed at the discretion of the roundtable this cycle. So that is our recommendation. And I think we have a great foundation to work off of from our last RTP. And I think a lot of the discussion that we had earlier today is kind of encompassed in the policy element. And we've spoken about creating a resilient transportation network and creating innovation. So I think those meet 2 of 5 criteria, and economy and equity and other goals that we have for the RTP. But yeah, that concludes my presentation. I'm open to discussing the policy element with you all. Erin.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we have a question?
Okay, my comment is it seems like based on the changes in transportation since the last RTP is that we bring forward Vision Zero or similar, reducing serious injuries and fatalities as a specific goal, not as a little element of a goal. And potentially, this is just, I'm not sure I'm raising this, is should we bring either the different types of either EV infrastructure, hydrogen, that piece of it as a bigger piece, alternative fuel, because of the changes and all as a bigger goal or element. I don't know about, I don't feel strongly about that. I'm opening that up for comment. The first one, I feel like it's a big element now and should be brought forward a lot more and emphasized more.
Yeah, thanks for that comment. Definitely something we'll discuss and bring forth at a future roundtable. We agree that Vision Zero within the last 4 years has become at a more of an emphasis in the community. And so that is something for sure that we'd like to take a look at. Thank you.
Any other comments from members? Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So you plan not to have a policy subcommittee because you're thinking that basically the 22 goals, policies, and strategies really don't need to be drastically redone. They basically need to be tweaked. So you think basically what you just present, this slide presentation will be made available to the roundtable on the Plan Fresno website tomorrow, for everybody to look at and to study in detail, and hopefully look at and study in detail, and then forward to the COG staff any comments, recommendations, or modifications. And then any comments, recommendations COG staff would then gather up, consolidate any overlaps, and then at future roundtable meetings forward and discuss that future roundtable meetings. I can't recall the timeline for when the final decision has to be made. But when would public outreach take place on these goals policies? When would public outreach take place?
So some of the public outreach has already happened with some surveys of assessing the community's values and needs. And so we've gotten some initial surveys that have been completed that will help inform the policy element. In the spring, there will be another round of public outreach that'll be more tied to the scenario development, but in the scenario development, a lot of these policies are tied specifically to certain scenarios. And so that will be another place that we'll be able to gather public input. How you described kind of the process for the roundtable is how, we see this. We want to have this discussion today and get folks' comments, like Aaron's comments on Vision Zero or zero emission technology. That can be something incorporated, but also we want to get, many more comments from all of you. We do feel like in the 2022 cycle, there was kind of an in-depth effort that was done specifically to have an all-encompassing update of the policy element, where we feel like this cycle, it would be probably, we feel like that foundation is quite strong and that we can update from that cycle with the input of the roundtable, your guys' thoughts and additions or changes you'd like to see. So that's our suggestion, is that we keep it at the roundtable and get the kind of all the comments and opinions of folks here. And then we'll bring forth an item in a few months. So once we've gathered information and comments from all of you, we'll bring back to this body kind of any additions or changes that we'll look to be making to the policy element.
Any other questions? Go ahead.
I have more of a comment. Looking at the policy, and it seems like you've really done a good in-depth job just 2 years ago to develop all these policies. I just want to remark that out of those 5 policy goals, 4 really have a lot of reference to climate change and climate adaptation. And I think, when we think back of the discussion that we just had, if it's so relevant on 4 points, maybe we need to put in a little bit more effort and to really think about that implementation piece. And I understand that it's hard and that it's maybe not that doable. And I'm not saying that everybody should be forced to do this, but yeah, I think those policies really show that climate change has to be addressed and it really should be thought hard, or if the guidelines are in line with those goals. It's always nice to have really nice, fluffy, good sounding goals, but we really have to, work towards delivering them. And I understand if it's uncomfortable, some parts of that, but I think it really warrants to have more of that discussion again. So those are my comments. Thanks.
Thank you. Tony, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Simran. Great presentation. I just wanted to second Aaron's remarks about Vision Zero. I appreciate the idea of including more emphasis on that under the safety section. I also appreciate her comments about the energy systems. We, with the Fresno State Transportation Institute, we're actually doing a transportation energy summit coming up next March, which will talk about some of these alternative energy strategies. So I think that's also an area looking at our energy, our future energy for our transportation system and developing those networks Dissers mentioned there. So thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think the Vision Zero element will be included under safety, and then to speak to the alternative fuel vehicle options. I think that is embedded in the policies. I might have just not read it verbatim, but I think we have included that in the past.
Any other member comments?
I think my comment just means like, I like, you have all the good stuff in there, just kind of like make the bigger goals a little, which ones do you want to bring front and center to make it more simplistic or, I don't know, just punchy or there's a lot of words in there and a lot of little, so I think it is great foundation as Laura said, but a little bit of simplifying it.
Yeah.
What our goals are.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a lot of fluff, but there are a lot of programs and projects that coincide with these policies. And I'm confident that we have in the last 4 years at least acted on those. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you. Is there any public comment on this item?
Moses Stites, Fresno County Rural Transit Agency. In the discussion that you folks have had, I think it's excellent, but I think if you get too deep in the weeds on some of these particulars, you're going to have agencies like FCRTA, FACTS, and Clovis get caught up in trying to comply with some of these detailed information. While I can appreciate the concrete comment, right now FCRTA is building a maintenance facility in the city of Selma. We originally had asphalt there, but we thought, it would be a little more ecological to go concrete for the few extra dollars. So a lot of this discretion is really up to the locals. And even though we have certain mandates to convert to zero emission vehicles by 2040, we're all making an effort to do that. There's also some restrictions to that effect. The utility companies, I won't mention any of them by name. And also some jurisdictions have zero capacity or close to no capacity. Some of you don't even know that you don't have capacity. But what I'm getting at is these policies, you want to leave them as general as possible so that there's a framework, like an umbrella, to work within that framework. All the responsible member agencies and municipalities know the streets, the roads, local highways, all the structures, what's required, what's not required. So I really think that your energy should really be focused on strengthening those policies without getting into the details of specific, type of vehicles. FCRTA applauds hydrogen fuel cell, but it may not be within our preview with the environment, with certain locations that we serve, Reedley, Selma, Parlier, and so forth, or the general Fresno County area, or the unincorporated communities of Fresno County. So once you start getting into that detail, you're going to leave something out. The generality of these policies and goals, I think, are excellent. And we're all, I think, professional in this arena, and we all try to comply with all our different requirements. And as such, we can interpret in between those goals and those requirements, what those requirements are without being specific. Because when you do that, you're going to leave somebody out. And you want to be inclusive of everybody in the county. The minute you do that, then you start excluding groups, individuals, and the haves and the have-nots. So with that, I just want you to consider those comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Moses. Any other public comment? All right, thank you. This was informational only. Do we want to go back to item B? Are we ready? Okay, I'm going to open up item B one more time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, everyone, for that inconvenience. So speaking amongst my colleagues, we have decided, if everyone is fine with it, we would like to bring back question number 9 regarding the climate adaptation. for the road capacity increasing category. So you'll probably be able to see it on screen. Currently, we have the emission mitigation. We would still keep that question. However, in adding this question back, that would mean we would have to reduce the weighted percentage for another project. So if Denise, if you could scroll all the way up on that Excel spreadsheet, all the way to question number 1, that would mean that we would reduce the 15% of the regionally significance from 15 to 10%, because we still need to have a total of 100% per category. So we would have to make that decision in order to, to get this approved if possible. And then in regards to the innovation, so I guess I would want to know a little bit more about what would it, I guess when it looks like we heard about the materials, right? The recycled materials, lower carbon contact and higher reflective content. But we would have to see where we could incorporate that. I know you mentioned that every category, but we also want to make sure that the agencies are able to make these projects happen while also meeting the guidelines, federal guidelines. When they apply for these funds, there is guidelines that they have to follow, certain criteria they have to follow in order to make sure they're able to build these roads and obligate these projects. And we do not want to cause any delay or difficulty in continuing to do that process. So really, we would just like to be able to incorporate it if we can. The only thing is we would have to potentially change the question rather than a yes or no, maybe to be, I guess, a question that has multiple choice, just like the rest of them, where it has, 100 points, 50 points, 25 points, and 15 points. And that's something, if we think we can do, we could potentially revise. If it's just for, if it's just for the capacity increasing, I guess I would just want a little more clarification.
Are you looking for clarification from the members then?
Yes, please.
Okay.
If we can.
So you're only talking about the capacity increasing category only right now.
Correct.
Basically, so your first recommendation was to create a new question.
Yeah, so we would bring back question number 9 that had to do with the climate adaptation.
Bring it back. Okay,
yeah,
at
so
5%, or at which you
yes, which we had it before. And the project read, does this project reflect designs to mitigate or adapt to climate, extreme heat, flood risk, etc.? It is a yes or no answer question. If we wanted to add the ability for it to be more of a multiple choice where we have the option of 150, 25 points like we do with other questions up there, if you're able to use that as an example, then we could see if that's something we might be able to revise in order to get approval today, if it's for that portion of the capacity increasing.
Yeah. Yeah, well, one thing that gets me the whole situation is going to be, because I look upon these percents basically as points. Really, these percents are actually points. Because when you go through all the mathematics, you got 100 points at the end. We go through all the mathematics, and these 150, that's if you get 100, that's you get 15 points. Looking at question number 1 as an example, 100 means 15 points, 50 means 7.5 points. Is what it means actually. Looking at that's what it really means in actual fact. So at the end, you want to keep the categories, all categories, at 100 points. So by adding something, somebody else loses.
Yeah, in this case,
that's the bottom line. In order to give points for innovation, however it may be, something else loses. So the question is, if you give innovation 1, 2, 3, or however points, who loses? Who loses? And number 2 is, or has been disturbing me the whole conversation, is the timeline. You want to get this criteria approved by the COG Policy Board at the end of September. to do your call for projects to local jurisdictions on the 1st of October. So you're looking at a tight time frame, and you would like to have this whole thing done this afternoon.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Yes, Nick.
So, someone made a comment I have a tendency to concur with, is this process happens every 4 years. Every 4 years. And particularly on the innovation that Laura is advocating for. And I tend to agree with City of Fresno's comments about there's an awful lot that's not yet known and the models cannot yet adopt. Let's just go with what was presented by the staff and go back and say, hey, let's 4 years from now, when we're sitting around the same table, make it a goal to make this thing, refine it more thoroughly. Because I don't think we have the flexibility to change that timeline.
Thank you, Nick. So it is true, we do not have the flexibility. Unfortunately, we do want to make sure the call for project goes out in October and we have enough time. This is going to be thousands of projects that we have to, whether the member agencies or us have to enter manually into Fresno track. That system is quite slow. We've already started the process of contacting every member agency, making sure we have all the projects they want to carry over until the 2026 RTP. And that in itself was weeks. We're still actually waiting for some projects. So it is a process where it's time consuming, and those projects have to be rescored. So it's quite the process. And then to have all of them, the finalization of selecting by December of 2024 is quite the tight timeline. In addition to that, the FTIP, the 2027 FTIP, will have to be approved within the same time frame. So if one of them gets delayed, then the other one gets delayed. And projects are at stake here. I specifically work on the programming of these. I see agencies that sometimes can't move forward on certain projects because there is delays in right of way. There's other delays that they not anticipate for. This is a 20+ year plan that, again, we don't even know what the innovation might be in 20 years. And what we want to do is make sure that we can move forward, build the projects we need to build, and then make the changes that need to be made as things change. So again, we could push forward maybe in the FTIP because that's a shorter plan, and try to, and many of you will probably be in the FTIP guidelines meetings, and maybe it's something that you could incorporate there on the FTIP in the guidelines in order to make sure there's more innovation. But for the RTP, it is a 20+ year plan, 23 years specifically, and there is a lot of changes that are going to happen within that time. And we do hope that member agencies do allow or choose innovative ways to obligate our program. And sorry, I'm always thinking about programming projects. However, in this 20+ year plan, really, it's just about making sure that they can move forward. They're in the RTP. That way they get their points when they apply for funding and that these projects come into fruition. So we are hoping that we could somehow make it happen today.
Ryan, I know that I promised you you'd be the first question. So Ryan, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to tell everybody where I was at. I agree with the comments that were previously made by the city of Fresno. I agree with Nick Palladino and Moses Stites' comments on the previous item. I think a lot of his words of wisdom apply here too. So, but I don't agree with adding criteria for materials. It's just too early in the process for us from an agency perspective. And that might be better applied at the grant application stage. But where I'm at, I like the ranking criteria as presented originally by staff on this item, and I would be willing to make a motion to that effect when appropriate. So,
thank you. Any other questions? Go ahead, Laura.
I just wanted to provide a comment, and I certainly see COG's perspective, and I understand the time schedule. I think this year we are coming to numbers where it said that we are passing past a 1.2 Celsius temperature increase on a worldwide scale. We are really at a point that humanity has never been before at, that we while it's been known for a long time, it's not been acted on, that our climate is changing. And we obviously are not really knowing exactly what to do about it. We have a lot of good ideas, a lot of good thoughts, but it takes a really long time to implement that. And I just want to ensure that we think about that. And I understand that here in our region, this is sometimes a very hard discussion to be had. But I guess I always go from this perspective as an immigrant to this great country, that America stands for the brave and the strong, and there's this monster of climate change, and we just have to be brave and you know, address it and work something out. It takes a long time to do change and to do transformation. And yes, it takes a long time to figure out what kind of materials can actually be used. But unless we try, we are not really going to be successful. And I just would like everybody to encourage to consider that as we're working on this. And I can understand that since it hasn't been part of the process discussion before, to look at embodied materials, that it might for this round be too early, but I would like to see some other form and version how this group of local agencies start talking to each other on how can this be made possible. Even in 4 years, right? 4 years in the transportation world, they come up really fast. So how are we going to start trying them out if we don't give kind of like some form of incentives within project specification? And you know how it is, if you have it in a grant, that's when work starts happening to address them. So while, yes, our timetable, our administrative timetable, you know, makes it very difficult, I think the world's timetable sometimes demands that we do things a little bit differently. And I think that's why we should all strive to push and work towards those things. And if you know, there's not the agreement to bring it into those criteria at this point, it would still be great to form some form of vehicle to start talking about this, because there's a lot to be learned, and there's a lot that can be achieved by not just looking at the operational carbon, which we like to do, which is important too, right? We need to reduce the operational carbon, but we really have to think about that embodied carbon as well. And it has a big significance, especially for all the roads and pathways and whatever bridges we are creating. Thank you.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
I want to kind of say, you know, as someone who designs the projects, this is a grander scale. When we put the RTP together, we put our wish list of every project we could ever think of, you know, that we think we're going to do in the next 20 years in the cities that we're working in. And then once we get to like the grant application, that's when we start deciding. And so I'm not saying we don't, we've done recycled concrete projects. We've done, you know, grind, compact, overlay, you know, use the existing asphalt and then, you know, as AB and then putting pavement over. So we do incorporate that. But like, you know, Jill said, at this higher level, it's a little bit harder. I think if we put it or incorporate it into the grants, then that would be a better level, because those are within the next 4 years. Can this actually be done? And that's when the engineers who are actually designing them going to be, you know, implementing the projects, they would be able to decide, yes, you know, take an R value test. Can the road handle it? Is the road, you know, the existing soil going to be able to handle that? You know, there's just so much more at a higher level once you get into design. As you're at the planning level, it's a little bit harder.
Can I just do a quick follow-up to understand? Because I'm under the impression and that this is determining the grand guidelines for what you give the points to go towards funding. Isn't that the case?
No, so just to clarify, each grant program has its own guidelines that's specific to each grant. This process is really determining the long-range planning process of evaluating projects over a long horizon. So the grants usually come in when a project's like 3 to 5 years out from, and it needs construction funding. Those are the grants that the jurisdictions are talking about to actually build, engineer it, and build the projects. This effort is really evaluating over 20 years, so multiple decades, the long-term impacts of the collective transportation system. And so, yes, I mean, to the points that were made earlier, we are at a much higher level view, and we do a lot of regional modeling to kind of determine what the impacts are going to be at a regional level. But the projects themselves, when they're funded and they're moving towards construction, and they need those, funding sources for whether it's state, local, federal funds, those are the grant programs that they're talking about for actually building the projects, designing, the types of materials that you're wanting to see implemented. That's really what happens at the kind of construction grant funding phase, which is typically 3 to 5 years before a project is built. So we are working at two different kind of timescales here. This effort and what you're approving today, the scoring criteria, is really evaluating, a multi-decade modeling effort.
Robert?
And I was going to add on to that, we are also in the process and will be, I think, within the month, scheduling what we call our programming subcommittee that will look at the guidelines and policies and procedures for those specific grants that that Fresno COG in particular administers, particularly the federal grant, the larger ones that the jurisdictions typically rely on for these kinds of projects, including the congestion mitigation, air quality, the surface transportation block grants, and the carbon reduction program grants. And so those, this could be a topic of discussion for those updates to the guidelines, policies, and procedures that would be coming up just within the next month. So.
Okay.
Wait, yes.
Thank you for the explanation. And with that in mind, I think for this long time frame, it might even make even more sense to have some language that addresses materials. And I think the recommendation was, does a project consider alternative materials that mitigate or adapt to climate change? Would still be, especially for this long time frame, a very valid addition to what has already been thoughtfully developed. Yeah, I still think it would make a lot of sense.
Is there any other member comments? So I'm going to open up to public comment because I know we have a member comment coming. Ed Moses.
Moses Stites, FCRTA, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I think to Laura's comment, and I think Paul made some good clarifications about project applications and the review process, and this being a long-term RTP over a 10-year period. But more importantly, to Laura's comment, I think and I had to get up close because I guess my glasses aren't working, but I think if you look at the notes to the side, I think just the simple connotation to the effect that says innovation, concepts, and new technology considered. Boom, you're done. The other criteria with material, ZEV, air quality, other things can be within the grant applications. I know for a fact that Janelle and I apply for a lot of funding, okay? And I have to go before some of you that are on the committees. One of the questions that's always asked, what innovation are you bringing forth? Can you describe that innovation? So you have that opportunity at different levels. You don't want to get into so much detail here where you're basically throwing out the baby with the bathwater. You want to save the baby, okay? At least I think you do. So in reality, consider that, okay? Innovative concepts and new technology considered or evaluated. your own language. I'm just trying to cut to the chase so that everybody walks away with something here and is happy with it. Not in that detail, because you don't want to get caught up in that, okay? Because that can be your worst enemy at coming back. Thank you.
Thanks, Moses. Any other public comment? Oh, okay, I'm going to bring it back now and ask for a motion on this item. We did? We did, that's right. Okay. Yeah, so now I'm going to need a second.
Ryan's motion?
Hmm?
I'll second Ryan, the original.
The
just
original.
approve-
Okay, so I have a
Approve as is.
motion from Ryan.
City of Mary Lee.
Okay, and I have a second. So all in favor, say aye.
Question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So regarding the climate adaptation suggestion for the point modification, so that presumably is not included in Ryan's motion, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, so motion second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay. One,
I vote no.
two. All right, thank you. Motion passes. Okay, moving on to item D, the RTP community survey results. Brenda?
Thank you so much. Hopefully this will be an easier one. Okay. So Fresno Council of Governments contracted with Rhea and Parker, who was commissioned to do research within the Fresno County region. With our direction, they enlisted survey participants reflective of the Fresno County demographics as a whole. And they ranked defined values as well as transportation funding priorities and developed a findings report, which was attached to your agenda. Hopefully you had a chance to take a look at that. The Fresno COG Regional Transportation Plan will be edified by this, as well as your committee and the additional committees on board, in just giving you more tools in the toolbox for you to use to make a decision moving forward on the various things we bring before you. Today we have Mr. Richard Parker and Lou Rhea with us from Parker and Rhea, Rhea and Parker, got that backwards, to present the survey findings to you. And after they complete the presentation, then we'll be happy to take any questions on that moving forward. And this is an information item. So I will turn it over to Rhea and Parker.
Your microphone might be.
Richard.
I've unmuted myself. I'm Richard Parker. Do you want me to share my screen, or were you
No,
gonna...
we've got you. We have your presentation up.
I'm not seeing that.
No, I'm not seeing it either.
Yeah, if you want to, you can share your screen and we can work off that.
Let's see. We have it now?
I see it now.
We sharing?
It's your desktop.
It's my desktop. Okay, let's.
You'll just want
Start the presentation.
Yeah, just start the slideshow. We can see the PowerPoint. We'll just need you to start the slideshow so that we can see it in the room.
Let's see, slideshow.
There we go.
Beginning. Okay, how are we doing now?
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm Richard Parker, President of Ray and Parker Research, Emeritus Professor, San Diego State. Lou Ray is with me, and Lou is also an Emeritus Professor from San Diego State. We've been working together for 40 years. I know we don't look it, but we've been working together, and we've worked many projects in Fresno over the years, including this particular survey 4 years ago. And we want to thank you for your continued faith in the work that we do. Right. So as was mentioned previously, we were looking at 10 community values and 9 transportation funding priorities. And they're the same as they were 4 years ago so that we can make comparisons from over this period of time. And you can see here the 10 community values literally in the words that we used in the survey. We'll be shortcutting it as we talk here, obviously, so that we can speed things up. This is the order that people rank them. And we'll be going into more detail in just a second, but you can see here, preserving farmland and agriculture was rated as the most important community value. And at the bottom end, more multifamily housing being made available was rated as the least important. All the questions had exactly the same wording as they did 4 years ago, except where I've inserted in blue, the 2020 question about more walkable neighborhoods. We now added promote a healthier lifestyle. The reason I want to point this out is when you're comparing surveys from one period to another, if you've changed the wording in any substantial way, you need to point that out. So, in this particular case, didn't seem to have much of an effect. So again, we'll be going through it in more detail, but you can see here, preserving farmland, supporting a robust economy, investing in the neighborhoods, in existing neighborhoods, safeguarding clean air, preserving open space, make the neighborhoods more walkable, more bicycling available, continue the traditional development of communities that are predominantly single family, provide more mixed use neighborhoods, reduce the effects of climate change, which was sort of surprisingly low, but that's the way the people felt. And there should be more multifamily housing available. We also looked at 9 transportation funding priorities, and at the top of the list, not surprisingly, repair potholes, maintain streets, make roads and intersections safer, and reduce traffic congestion. On the bottom end are build more electric vehicle charging stations. Last time, the question was broader. It asked about technologically innovative options, and you'll see that did have an effect. Although it was the lowest ranked priority before, it is now even lower. And then the other factors here were building and maintaining pedestrian sidewalks, improving bus service, providing more hiking and biking trails, new words outside of developed areas, just for clarity's sake, so that people didn't confuse them with pedestrian walkways. Increase the number of bike lanes and bike paths in developed areas. Again, new words, in developed areas. Support more shared mode transportation, for example, carpools, van pools, Uber, etc. We took a sample of 1,037 respondents from all over the county, which you'll see in a bit. The margin of error for that is just a fraction over plus or minus 3% at 95% confidence. 604 respondents were by telephone, landline, and cell, and 433 were online respondents. Among these respondents, 925 were in English, 112 were in Spanish. This is our sample, and I won't go through it point by point, but I think what you can see is we have a pretty good sample. The males, females, balanced. The ethnic groups are almost perfectly consistent with what the county is. Slightly older, slightly less income, but not of a significant nature. Slightly more educated. Fresno, the city, had a few more respondents than it has population. But again, it's all within, margin of error issue. It's all quite good. Work status, you had 49% employed, full-time or self-employed, 11% part-time. The labor force over 18 in the county is 60%. So that's what you've got there. We're very happy with the sample we got. It required a little waiting, but it's really quite good. And 83% of the people responded in English. or they indicated that to be their primary language spoken at home, 16% Spanish. The other 1% was a smattering of actually Indic languages. Little extra piece of information. We really emphasized making certain that we got a good balance throughout the county and throughout the city. We did, so just the city of Fresno, we didn't want everybody coming from one part of the city of Fresno. So our zip code analysis showed these percentages within the city of Fresno, 15% from the central, 13% northeast, et cetera. So you've got a nice distribution within the city of Fresno. City of Clovis had 13% of the sample, and the balance of the county had 28% of the sample, most from south of Fresno, but a good portion from the west, and a small portion, obviously, from the eastern foothills and mountains. Lou's going to talk a little bit right now about transportation behavior and go into the values a little bit more, and then I'll come back and talk about the transportation funding priorities.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Yeah, I'm Lou Ray, the other half of Ray and Parker Research. I'm also an emeritus faculty at San Diego State University. Transportation behavior is the topic here. With regard to our question on telework, among the 64% of respondents who are employed in the sample, another, or 64% of those, do not telework. So it's not a very popular way to work. However, 20% do telework every day. Next slide. Okay, now we're going to talk about the transportation mode to work or school on the part of our respondents. And it's very clear looking at the first two bars that among the 53% who commute to work or school, the dominant travel mode is driving alone in my car. And there are similar results, of course, for 2020 surveys. Next slide. Okay.
Was I supposed to move on, Lou? Okay.
Yes, that's
okay.
Right. That's the next one. Now it's the transportation mode this is the travel time to work or school. So among the 53% who commute to work or school, 80% report a travel time of 30 minutes or less. And you can see that 80% there in the, does my pointer work here? 36.
Sure, I got it.
I'll do it. 36 and the 44 add up to the 80% travel time less than 30 minutes or less. And this is consistent with the 2020 travel time.
And the median is 18 minutes.
Yeah, the median in each is 18. That's where we find some of the consistency there. Okay. Now we take a look at the transportation mode to frequent non-work, non-school destinations. Similar pattern. Regarding travel time here, 80% report a travel time of 30 minutes or less.
Oh, you're on the next one?
No, I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. This is, no, next one, no. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's I went ahead one. This is the transportation mode to frequent non-work, non-school destinations. Previous, we talked about to work or school. This is non-work, non-school destinations. A similar pattern here. The dominant travel mode again here is driving alone in their car. Similar results again in 2020. And I want to point out that in the current survey in 2024, we see the car being used more than previously. And you can see that with the carpool. I mean, that's a car, and they're using the car more there in conjunction with their own car. Okay, next slide.
For some reason, oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
I mixed up.
Yeah. And this is to travel time to the most frequent non-work, non-school destinations. And regarding that, 85% report a travel time of 30 minutes or less. And you can see that with the 36 added to the 49, it's 85% of 30 minutes or less. And the slightly shorter trip length in 2024, but not really worthy of too much emphasis there. Okay. Now we're going to lend a little bit more detail on the community values that Richard outlined at the beginning of our presentation.
Now, one slide got out of place here. I want to see what it was so I can, oh, okay, it belongs at the end. I'll get to it. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, there we are, the mean ratings. Okay, so these are the mean ratings of the most important community values. And we list here the top four of those. And the first three values, okay, which is preserve farmland, support a robust economy, invest in existing communities, are at the top of the value list in 2024. And these ratings indicate a somewhat higher level of importance than was reported in 2020. You can see the blue bars slightly higher than the orange bars, which reflect a higher level of
And this is the
importance.
mean on a scale of 1 to 10.
Yeah, that's the mean on a scale of 1 to 10.
How important? They're asked, how important are these values to you and to the community?
Right.
And then this is,
And the mean score, obviously the higher the mean score there, the higher the level of perceived importance. Okay, now we go to
the next, the ones that aren't in the top four.
yes, these are the ones that are the low end of the preference scale. And I'd like to call your attention to the bottom two because they're particular relevance here. The last two values reduce the effects of climate change and more multifamily housing, particularly low ratings. And it's noteworthy that these ratings are even lower than what was reported in 2020. So that's really noteworthy in terms of the climate change and more multifamily housing. Move on. Okay, percentage of respondents rating high importance community values at 8 out of 10. Okay, now here we're using another rating scale. The other were mean ratings, 1 to 10. Here, we're taking a percentage of those who rated each community value as either 8, a 9, or a 10. So they're rating it high. And what do we find? We find that a robust economy, preserving farmland, and investing in communities, the first three there, reveal higher ratings in 2024 than in 2020. Because what do you have there? You have the brown bar being a little bit longer, and then the pink bar in the first three. So that is your key finding here. All right, now we go to the low end of the scale again. This secondary scale, 8, 9, or 10. And what do we find here? Well, let's see, note the last three values, because I think that is really key to this chart. The more multifamily housing, continued predominance of single-family homes, and more mixed development, mixed use development. In 2024, the percentages are relatively low, around in the 60s, in the low 60s percentage of those rating 8, 9, or 10. And they're even lower in 2020 in the mid 50 percentages. The percentages in the mid 50s.
But those three items.
Those three items at the bottom here. See it. Okay. And that's critical. Okay. Now, some other notable value differences we wanted to point out, and the one we selected, because I think it had particular relevance, was the rating of the most important community values by residential location. Okay, and we're just using these as an example, the first three, and I'll tell you why in a second. Here we have the three areas that we dealt with, the city of Fresno, the city of Clovis, and the balance of Fresno County. And what the dominant finding here is that the residents of the city of Clovis report the lowest rating for these three particular items that I mentioned. Okay.
And the rating is of their importance, how important they are. Not how well they're delivered or any such thing. It's how important
how they rated the importance of these particular characteristic or community values. And you could see that the orange bar representing Clovis is the shortest of the three and each of the three values. But I do want to point out, we presented these three values, they were the top three, but the same pattern regarding Clovis having the shortest bar is the case for all of the community values. Okay, now I believe we turn this back to Richard.
I'll jump in now, right?
Yeah.
And I'll talk about the funding priorities. One thing I would like to point out here, going back a second, is the report itself not only looks at each of these values and funding priorities that we'll get to in just a second by residential location, but it also does the same thing by ethnic group, by age group, by gender, by the primary language in the home, by work status. So the report, obviously we don't have enough time. You probably don't have enough patience for us to go in through all of it, but the report itself, if you're interested in how the different ethnic groups feel, or how the different age groups feel, or how people who telework versus those who are students, how they feel about these things, that's all in the report, and we're happy to
And I
answer
think
questions about that or share. Lou, you want to say something?
Yeah, well, I think that you'll find, based on your interests, a lot of basis for policy decisions within those crosstabs, by the values by a lot of those characteristics. Go ahead.
So the funding priorities, you can see we have, in terms of how important they are, they're at the top, they're more important than the values were. I mean, you're looking at some of these that are pushing a perfect 10 score. But not surprisingly, given the fact that this is a driving population, as was pointed out by Lou, you see repairing the potholes, making roads safer, and reducing traffic congestion at the top. And all three of which are slightly more important than they were years ago. Then maintaining pedestrian sidewalks comes next. It's a little bit lower than it was. And then we get to the bottom grouping. And what you see here at the very bottom is the more electric vehicle charging stations. There's not a lot of emphasis in the population on that. And it is quite a bit lower than it was 4 years ago. But as I pointed out earlier, the 2020 question was broader. It asked about technologically innovative options, and it didn't narrow it down to just one. But what you see here is that electric vehicle charging stations don't seem to carry a lot of weight. Also on the low end are shared transportation and bike lanes and paths in developed areas. Those have lower ratings, and they're lower this year than they were 4 years ago. Now, the 8 out of 10 factor that Lou addressed earlier, similar. The repairing potholes, making the roads and intersections safer, and reducing traffic congestion are at the high level, although maintaining pedestrian sidewalks kind of moves up a bit and ties with traffic congestion. Excuse me. But potholes and making roads and intersections safer are very strong priorities. Now, what I need to do is, I saw that one got out of place. Let me go back here. On the low end of the 8 out of 10 rankings, well, that's the community values. Let's see, where do yeah, it's not, I guess I thought I saw it that it got out of place here. All right, never mind.
Richard, it was that purple one.
Pardon?
That's all right.
Yeah, it's not important. It follows the same pattern. The only difference, and it doesn't show up here because I don't know what happened to the chart, is that the importance of improving bus service went up a little bit this time from what it was before, in terms of the number of people who rated at 8 out of 10 or higher. And once again, Clovis finds these funding priorities to be a little less important. And the county itself is on the very high end in terms of funding potholes and making roads and intersections safer. That, in a nutshell, is what we found. It's a driving population. They want their potholes fixed. It's also an agricultural county, as we all know. And here, I'll stop sharing. It's an agricultural county, and that's very important to people. And the economy is very important to people. The thing that sort of surprised me anyway was the climate change. I know it's a divisive issue in many cases, but it didn't obtain a significant or a substantial amount of importance ratings. Okay, so I know the meeting is supposed to end now, and I wanted to speed through this as much as
Thank
possible.
thank
So,
you. Thank you, gentlemen, very, very much. Does anybody
Yeah,
have a question? Go ahead. I don't want to take your job.
Oh, no, you're doing fine. I was just going to ask the same.
Does anybody have a question for either professor? No, I think you were thorough. Oh,
I'm sorry, I take a little bit more time. On the questions of making roads and intersections safer, is there any way to distinguish if this is out of concerns for pedestrians or out of concerns for cars?
no, we didn't. You mean safer for pedestrians versus safer for cars? That we did not ask that question.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from members? Yes.
I have two. Apart from city and of Clovis and Fresno, the balance of the county, is any of that information available by city?
It's available by zip code.
Okay, that's helpful. And then with relation to the time frame that the prior survey was done, have you found any trends related to the information that was, or the survey results from 2020, which I think everybody remembers as the COVID period, that would skew some of the results, and any trends that kind of may or should be noted as part of the survey results?
Well, they weren't driving as much 4 years ago. So the driving factors loom more important this time, the potholes and such. Oh, and in many cases, those potholes have gotten worse. Lou, you want to say something?
Well, you really can only infer that. We don't actually have the evidence, except, maybe circumstantial.
Well, we have the trends, which is that
Less driving,
agriculture and potholes and street safety, are more important to the population this time than they were before. And you're right. The inference that we drew is people are driving and they're out there more.
Richard, this is Brenda.
Yes. Hi, Brenda.
We have the questions that we asked for this and the questions that were asked for the last one. And I thought, because the survey was actually done, the actual questions were asked in the summer of 2020. So it was still fairly new into COVID. Like, we actually came back to work for a while and then went back home. And I thought maybe we asked them not about how they were commuting at that moment, but how do you typically commute? Do you remember?
Before in 2020, how they typically?
Did we ask more about how you typically do it, or how you were doing it right now?
Sure, I think we'd have to go back to the survey.
I would have to look
We'd have
at
to
that.
look that up, but if you're interested, we can.
I don't know. I don't recall. I mean, I could call it up pretty quickly here.
We'll look into that and get back to you. And the crosstabs for all of this, all the detail data is available.
Right. Yeah, everything is available. The report itself contains just the basic frequencies and the means, but certainly the crosstabs are available, and I can produce all those for you. And if you want any diving into the data by zip code, we can do that.
Great. Great. Thank you. Any public comment? All right.
And we could aggregate the zip codes if you need, so that you could have a city, but most of the smaller cities are just one zip code, I think, 1 or 2 or 3.
Okay, Erin?
Question, I guess, for the committee, is this what the people's feelings, should that drive our planning? Or is it our job to educate the public on what their priorities should be? Or are we supposed to reflect what the public already wants? I mean, because you see that when we look at all of people in this room that study all this stuff, we have different priorities than the public. So what is our job to come up with?
Well, I mean, I'll answer that. So as public outreach, so our job really is not to tell them how they should feel, but to assess and engage on the level that they're at. This is defining what's important to them, so you can use this as a tool in making your decisions. I don't think we have time to educate and change opinions. This is really, I mean, this is just, they're talking to, filling out a survey, they're talking to someone on the phone. This is really what they think. This isn't based on like, no one's watching me, no one's listening to me. This is my knee-jerk opinion about these issues, socially acceptable or not. Because they have no one's hearing them answer the questions. That's kind of how I take it on a personal level. But yeah, I don't think, I mean, even though the state says we need to move in a direction, it's just good to know what the public as a whole that's reflective of our population is sharing and is saying is a priority.
If I may, Madam Chair, this serves as an additional data point, if you will, in the RTP process. So it's, I think Brenda used the word tool.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's another tool in your toolbox as you're developing the policies, the guidelines, all the elements that go into the RTP. It's for your consideration to, to use or not to use as you see fit.
Right. And, if you feel strongly, that you have to work harder to get people to walk or bicycle, knowing how they feel about it will help you determine what sort of resources you should apply. And particularly when we get into the different ethnic groups and the different residential locations and such, there's a lot of information in here that is very usable in terms of how people feel, which then informs you where your resources should go.
I think it's also helpful in that it keeps us from making assumptions about what people might think, because I think that's easy to do. So, so now we have some data that we can.
Right, and it's stayed relatively consistent over the 4 years. So you're not looking at any anomalous sorts of findings here. This is the way people tend to feel in Fresno County.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that great information. Appreciate it.
Thank
Without any other
And
comments.
thank you again for asking us to help with this. We appreciate it.
One other comment. Yes, I would love to see any more deep dives into this data. So I would, if that information's available, would love to look at it.
We'll upload the complete study to our website with this PowerPoint presentation.
Sure, and then
if you
let us
want the
let us know.
background, I can email it to you.
Yes, please.
Be great. If you can email that out. Yeah, that'd be great.
Mhm.
Thank you.
For instance, I guess Brenda mentioned that there's a telework study going on or something. And so I pulled all the data out for people who telework, so that I can do that.
Tony, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just comment. I thought it was interesting that the highest ranked thing was the preservation of ag land, and that it kind of struck me as somewhat contradictory to the expressed desire for increased single family housing, because I see it, like I say, it's somewhat contradictory, unless you infer that people are wanting infill single family housing as opposed to developing ag land. So I just thought that was a bit of a caution in terms of further sprawl development into ag land there. So curious. Thanks.
Okay, well, thank you.
I see there's one other raised hand up there.
just want to follow up both to agree with that comment and also just to note that as the scenarios are being developed, given that there is this expressed public view, basically, you know, that actually is a very important value, conserving agricultural land. You know, just I think that would argue for that being taken into given perhaps more priority than it otherwise would be in development of the scenarios, like to reflect the importance of that value to the public.
Right. And again, it's been that way for 4 years that we know of. And it's Fresno County, it's important. And then, you know, when we get to let's see, where is it here? I mean, you can see that the balance of the county is pulling that way up.
I see we have another hand raised up there.
Yes, this is Sebastian with the City of Pearl here. Thank you for the presentation. It's really insightful. So my question is, are we going to be doing these every 4 years, or is this the 2020 and 2024 and that's going to be it?
Missed the question. This is done. Yes, it's done every 4 years.
Thank you.
Okay, no other questions then? We'll move on to the next item. Again, this was informational, and thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Okay, item E, Fall 2024 RTP Community Outreach Overview. And Brenda? you're up
Yes,
again.
thank you. Thank you for hanging in there with me on this one. This is very important, at least in my world. From September 16th through October to the 31st, we'll be gathering transportation project suggestions from the community. And this first leg of outreach, it's not required by any of our guidance, but it was developed to assist member agencies with the community outreach that they might want to do in responding to that RTP call for projects that's due by December 1st. In the past, we would go out and start doing our outreach, and it would be too late for people to give us input on things that they need within their community. So we started doing this. And it also provides the community an opportunity to get involved early in the RTP planning process. As you can, if you would, next slide. There we go. As you can see on this slide, this has the date. The survey will be available in 4 languages, and they'll be working through. We'll be working through our mini grants, which are managed by Southwest Strategies, our outreach consultants, and they'll be able to answer the survey through an online resource, through text, which we've never done before, but it's actually pretty sleek, and hard copy, so that we can be out at events and people can fill out a written copy, which we then enter the data into the system. Or they can just comment directly on one of our social media posts or ads via a dedicated email address and a dedicated voicemail line where they can just call and leave a message. And all of the ways that they can comment is included on all of our outreach. I asked Rachel from Southwest Strategies, our rep, to just talk to you very quickly about a resource they put together called Event in a Box that they're sharing with the mini grants that we'll be sharing with you, because we would like you to reach out to your contacts and share a flyer or a social media post or something, letting them know that the survey is available and that they can submit project suggestions. It also has 5 questions that are easy to answer, but they involve climate resiliency and mobility hubs. Those are 2 other studies that are going on right now, 2 other projects. And we wanted to, since we were drawing all this attention to RTP public outreach, we wanted to get a couple of questions for that too. So there's a lot to weigh in on with this. So if you would please share this out as we release it, and I'll be in touch with you on that, on how to, but I will turn this over to Rachel, who's going to go over very quickly what's in that Event in a Box and talk to you a little bit about how we're conducting the outreach.
Thanks, Brenda. Do you have my slides there?
Yes, there.
Okay.
Yeah, next.
Okay, perfect. So like Brenda said, I'll be super quick on this, and these strategies that I talk about here are some of our recommendations. So there's obviously more that we're doing as we embark on the public outreach, and really and all the work we do, we try to make everything as inclusive and equitable and thorough as we can, and meet people where they are, make providing feedback easy. I'm a former regional planner myself, so I know the COG world, and I know that it's all super technical. And so just making sure that people can cut through the language and, just make it easy to provide feedback. We do have some grassroots digital, social, print, and other engagement strategies, but what we're talking about here are the mini grants, and then also the event in a box. So the next slide. And the mini grant program, while we're transitioning to the next slide, has existed since 2014, and it allows local CBOs to conduct outreach for the project. So that can include everything from having a booth at an event, helping spread the word on social, scheduling presentations that Fresno COG staff lead, briefings and things like that. And then as part of that, we're preparing materials that includes a flyer that can be posted in a physical location, a fact sheet that's more of a giveaway for people, sample social media posts so that CBOs can include the link and to drive engagement and survey completion that way, and blurbs for recurring e-blasts and e-newsletters. So for the event in a box piece, which is, if you want to change it to the next slide, it's a lot of those same materials, and really the thought behind this, and it's something we've had a lot of success with on projects across the state, is working with CBOs and those who were involved in this, of course, everybody here, to help spread the word. And so it's really all the materials that we would have at, say, a pop-up booth leading up to something like that. And it's something that CBOs can take and have at their offices and help us, reach people who may not otherwise be engaged in a process like this. If you want to go to the next slide, I think, right. So this is a bit more information about what's included. And there are things, it can be either a charrette where you just have a display board available, or more formal where it is a scheduled presentation where Fresno COG staff would come to your office and give a presentation. But that's something that we wanted to highlight for everybody today. And yeah, I look forward to continuing to work with the committee.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much, Rachel. And we've been working really hard on making sure that these are very readable down to 8th grade level, which is what's recommended. Not easy with everything that you guys talk about, but working to do that. And so, COG will be forwarding all of the project suggestions twice, or in 2 phases. So we'll do the first download of project suggestions October 15th. We'll send that over to our member agencies for them to start taking a look at those, because sending you everything on November 1st or 2nd is going to be overwhelming. So we'll start sending them October 15th, and then everything received in that last 15 days, we'll send in a second phase, so that we make sure they have as much time as possible to take a look at it, see if there's anything that jives with your plans, your budgets and all of that you could submit for the RTP. And then the list of projects will be mapped. Everything submitted will be mapped, and it'll be in an online form, and that we'll make available by November 15th. So people can go in and look at everything that people submitted. And in that online survey, you can even upload a photo of an intersection or a street or a project idea or whatever, and then talk a little bit about what you'd like to see there. So you can't do that in the text version, though. And again, this is an informational item, and we would really welcome your help and input. We have reservations at some major events. The COG has made reservations, and then the mini grants are doing events as well, and going out to community things. So if you know of a community event that's coming up that you think, especially in the smaller cities or the rural area, we would love to send. I think we're signed up for Reedley. We're signed up for the Women's Conference and the Senior Day at the Fair. And but
Fiesta, and we're looking at farmers markets, the cherry auction throughout the area. I'll put my Denise, I sent you my my email address if that's something you want to share with everybody, and feel free to email me if
I put it on the next slide.
Okay. Oh, perfect. Spoiler alert. Thank you.
So if you want to go next. This is my contact information. Oh, here we go. My contact information. And then there are 2 different websites where you can find all of this information. The survey will be linked in the second one. But we will make it really easy to find. I've got some work to do. Adding all of this as soon as it's 100% ready. And so, and then the event in the box actually sends you a link. And you can open the box essentially and just hit download and the materials will come up for you. So we'll be in touch later, but thank you.
Awesome. Any questions?
I have
Yes.
a question. Okay. So the event in a box, is it like flyers that you would put like, say, in a waiting room of say a city, people come to City Hall?
I took this.
And it would just be like,
Yeah, so this is a
I'm here to do the
flyer
survey?
that you would hang up. It's got a QR code to the survey. It also tells you how to participate via voicemail, text, email, all the ways. So, and then there's a fact sheet, looks very similar. It's got the timeline for this particular project, this leg of outreach, so people understand when they can start getting information back, see where their project, if it's, and we hope to get back to people also to let them know, here's how you can tell, or if your project was included or not. And that's down the road some, but communicating back so that people know their input was valuable as well. So yeah, and then we'll have social posts that are ready to go. We don't have a very good Nextdoor account because they won't let us have one. They don't think we're a government agency, but you all have them.
So we should, all the government agencies should post these things in all of the offices that we can at the very minimum.
That would be
And
wonderful.
if we do
Yeah.
events, we should include this with any events we do.
Yes, that'd be great. Yeah.
City newsletters, anything like that.
Anything you're sending out, any way that you communicate already. We've talked about school districts, although poor parents are so overwhelmed right now. But the Department of Social Services loves our transportation guide, and I'm sure they would be happy to put something up. A lot of different offices. So yeah, that'd be great.
Yes, go ahead.
So thanks for that presentation on the outreach. Question I had is on the mini grants. How well in the past have they been received, as well as far as communities applying for them, and how's that determined if there's more than the 4 that?
More than the 4. We had a funding pot of money available, and then we told people a maximum they could apply for. We actually I feel like it's been received very well. Rachel, in fact, was one of the first mini grants we ever gave out. So we've been doing this since 2008. Many RTPs ago. And so I refined how these work. It was before they became popular. And they're a lot more money now. We don't get as big a response to it as I hoped, but we did get, we accepted 4, and some of them have never worked with us before. So it's a new audience, which is exciting. And then others who didn't apply said they would still do outreach with us. We evaluate the proposals, the number of people they say they're going to reach their audience, because we'd rather not have a crossover. And so some of them that are reaching out to the same audience, we have to make a decision which one we think might be more effective with that. But there is a scoring system for that whole process.
Any other questions? Any questions from the people out there that are sitting still patiently? So any public comment? Okay. All right, Brenda, thank you. All right, you guys hung in there to the end. All right, other items from staff?
So our next meeting will be on September 25th. So keep an eye out for the agenda for that. And really, that's it for this meeting.
Okay, great. And then just make sure everybody has their calendars marked for not only the 25th, but October 23rd. And then November 20th is actually a week earlier because of the Thanksgiving holiday. So if you guys make sure you mark your calendars for that too. And then the upcoming subcommittee meetings, you have the Environmental Justice Subcommittee on September 18th. Coming up, any items from members? Okay. Is there one? Yeah. Okay. Public presentations. This is the portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the roundtable on items within its jurisdiction that but not on the agenda. Is there anybody here for a public presentation? Sit down, Moses. All right, we adjourn. Thank you, guys. We love you, Moses.